Hello, good afternoon, British time here. Apologies we didn't manage to get to the Highlands on our mystery tour because the weather up there is a bit severe. It's a bit worse than what it is here, so we thought it would be better to stick in Edinburgh, so hence the change in plan here. So we are looking forward to presenting this tour as usual because we've got quite a lot of good stuff to talk about. We are going to start our walking tour. The rain is coming on a wee bit heavier just now, but we are, as we said before, we are guiding superheroes and nothing much will stop us.
A little bit of rain's not going to put us off. We are blue badge guides after all. We are professionals.
Yes, absolutely.
We're not made of sugar, we're not going to melt.
No,
not at all. And a little bit of rain does not put off a tour in Scotland.
No, not at all. So we're going to swing around shortly and have a look across the street. We are in central Edinburgh just now on Princess Street, and if you look at this building with the pillars in front of it, this goes back to the 1820s. It was the Corporation of Manufacturers and Fisheries it was originally built as, but it was also a facility for fine arts and the Society of Antiquaries. But today it is the Royal Scottish Academy, and the Royal Scottish Academy is an exhibiting space for members of like a club, if you like, where they have an annual exhibition. You submit work to it. I'm not a member of it, but they have wonderful, spacious gallery spaces in there. Now, the gallery was built to give the impression of being much bigger, and funny enough, from the outside it looks quite enormous, but if you go inside, it seems a bit smaller, and I think that goes to the art of the architect who was Sir William Playfair. He designed many buildings in Edinburgh, and looking further ahead at the building with the Scottish flag, Scottish National Gallery, and that is a free to enter exhibiting area with permanent collection, and it's got Leonardo da Vinci in there. It's got all the top names: Titian, Velasquez, Van Gogh, Monet, and if you're choice is art, then that is a place to make for if you're coming and visiting Edinburgh.
It's also got a good exhibition of the Scottish colourists, so they've got a whole Scottish section as well, so it's a good mixture.
It is.
And to see some of the Grand Masters, European Grand Masters and local Grand Masters as well, so it's lovely.
That's right. Now, just now, we've got a member of the royal family here, Prince William, or the Duke of Cambridge, because and Joel probably can tell you a bit more about it, but we have the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, which is on just now, which is a getting together of the ministers to discuss various agendas and so on. But I don't know if Joe wants to chip in it about that.
To discuss church policy.
Church policy, yeah, that's right. So you can see the old town of Edinburgh over here. It is very much up and down. If you go and visit there, it's not regular streets, you're going uphill, and the streets are quite twisty because Edinburgh is a very ancient city, capital of Scotland from 1437, and with a royal castle palace too, which is worth visiting if you come here too. So we're going to walk into East Princess Street Gardens, and people come in here and have their packed lunches sometimes with wonderful views over to the old town of Edinburgh. You see that big domed building, the big one with the green dome. Well, that's was the headquarters of the Bank of Scotland, which is now part of Lloyd's banking group. And the Bank of Scotland goes back to the 17th century, but this building here is 19th century because it was originally in another site. So, wonderful skyline. It's just beautiful.
It's a glorious skyline.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful at night when it's all lit up.
It is.
You stand at the new town and watch the old town. It's gorgeous the way they light it up.
Very stunning. So we're heading for this amazing monument which defines Edinburgh, the one we're going to talk about shortly. And you know you're in Edinburgh when you can see this big structure. But
now a wee bit about the gardens, because the gardens used to be part of used to be a loch, L-O-C-H.
Right.
So it was a Norloch, and the Norloch was drained when they started to build the new town. And I'll maybe talk a wee bit more about that as well. I've discussed it before, but some people may not remember the story of the Norloch and the witches, etc. So, in a wee while we'll discuss that. But just spin around here. I think the castle in view there.
Go down the steps, Joe, where we're going to have a look at the So yeah, you can see how nicely landscaped it all is, because they are building an extension to the National Gallery of Scotland to house the Scottish collection, and they're also making it much more accessible. So you can see the ramping where we don't have steps coming down from the top of the gardens, so that you can access for people with mobility issues. So it's very much a building for the 21st century now. So looking forward to that, which should be opening not too long down at the bottom there. Yeah. Now we're looking up at this monument, which is called the Scott Monument, and this was opened in about 1846, and it is commemorating one of the most famous residents of Edinburgh, born here, who was Sir Walter Scott. He was born in 1771 and died in 1832. In fact, this year is the 250th anniversary of the birth of Sir Walter Scott. And he was a historical novelist. He wrote many famous books, including the Waverly novels, and we've got Waverly Station here in Edinburgh, which is named after that book. And it came out 1814, the Waverly, which is all to do with Jacobites and some of the things we've been talking about before, trying to restore a Catholic monarch and all the kind of divides in religion and so on. So he's a very clever author. In fact, he was described by Jane Austen in this way. She said, Walter Scott has no business writing novels. He is fame and profit enough as a poet without taking the bread out of the mouths of others. I do not like him. And I don't know if I'll like Waverly, but I suppose I must. So it was a bit of a sarcastic comment, but it was so clever because she was giving over the fact that he was such a great writer. So I love that comment. The building is in the Gothic style of architecture, designed by a joiner. The design was by George Meikle-Kemp, and he just decided when the competition was open, after the death of Sir Walter Scott, there was a move to commemorate him with a great monument. And George thought he didn't have much of a chance, so he put his entry in under the name of John Morville. And John Morville was a sculptor connected with Melrose Abbey in the Borders, and he thought he was a bit anonymous, and it worked, and he actually won the competition. But a bit of a tragic figure, because he died before it opened, George Meikle-Kemp. He fell into the Union Canal and died, drowned, one foggy night, and Union Canal is in Edinburgh. So the monument today, stunning monument, and opened in the 1840s. His son actually was present at the opening of it, so there was still a connection with Meikle-Kemp. Now, it is 200 feet high. It's 61.5 metres high, and it's got 287 steps, and you can walk to the top of it. And we have information, even on the sign of the monument today, which says this is the tallest monument to any author. But that is not the case. There is a much taller monument to a man called Jose Marti, and it's in Havana, and Joe's been in Havana, and he's seen this monument
2 years ago and saw this monument that is the tallest monument dedicated to an author. This used to be the tallest monument dedicated, but hola, Havana.
So we've got our 61.5 metres, but would you believe the one to Jose Marti is over 130 metres? So that is almost, well, could be double the size of that. So that is just, must be so spectacular to see that. So the Scott Monument, so Sir Walter Scott, he was a historical novelist. He went back in time and wrote about contemporary issues, phrased against real events that had happened back in history. He was a folklorist. He got a lot of his talent from sitting on the knee of his grandmother, and he border connections, and he was just a great storyteller. Rob Roy, Heart of Midlothian, some of the other books that he wrote, the Waverly novels, I could go on and on. He was known internationally. His novels were translated into different European languages, and often when Joe and I are guiding in Edinburgh, we'll have people from other countries who will be very familiar with Walter Scott, even more familiar than maybe some of the Scots.
Especially with regards to Ivanhoe, which was an international bestseller as well. And a couple of operas have been dedicated to him as well. throughout by some of the great musicians in Europe as well. I think it's also fair to say that the whole idea of tourism in Scotland really came from Walter Scott, because he kind of tamed the idea about the wild Highlanders, and people were curious to travel. And also with the development of the railway system, it opened up the Highlands and people were glad to read about it. I guess he had a good distance from the last battle from 1746, from the Battle of Culloden. So he had a good historical distance. He could write about it almost neutrally.
Yeah, he did have a tragic period in his life where his publisher, went bankrupt, and Walter Scott showed loyalty and went and lost a lot of money, and he had to sell his house here in Edinburgh, Walter Scott did, but luckily he had invested in Abbotsford, which is a palatial manor house in the borders near to Melrose, the Scottish borders, so that's another place worth visiting today. Yeah, and his home is open to the public. It's open to the public.
And a really nice cafe there as well, and the gardens are lovely, rolling down to the River Tweed. And a nice day out, you can get the train now down as close to it as well, because the new train line opened up the bottom.
No, it's great. So will we
walk up
the steps? Yeah, get a closer look at some of the detail.
Now there's so many statues that adorn the monument itself, and the statues actually are related to characters in his novels as well. So you will see if you're a Scot aficionado, you'll be able to identify quite a lot of the statues here. There's even statues of John Knox, because John Knox does get mentioned in a few of his books as well.
In fact, there's 64 statues here of characters from Walter Scott's novels. And if you look at the statue, it's in Carrara marble of Sir Walter Scott, sitting facing the new town. Of course, he lived in the new town, so that's very appropriate. And on the other side, when we go around the other side, you can see his Irish wolfhound dog, Maida. He was a great dog lover. So contemporaries of Scott would see him out with never on and without his dog. He had various dogs through his life. Now, the monument, the stone here is called Binny Sandstone, and they restored it, this monument, or tried to restore it in the 1990s, I think 1998, because bits of it were falling off, and they were also trying to clean it because it's this beautiful yellow honey-coloured sandstone, but the smoke of the station when they had steam trains, but also this sort of sandstone does discolour with exposure to the air, because it's a shale-based sandstone which would be mined from underground. So they tried to clean it, but then bits started coming down and falling off. So they had to give up a bit on that, but they did manage a bit of restoration. So you can see some lighter bits here and there also in the monument.
And the quarry, the stone quarry, was closed for about a couple decades, and they reopened it to get some new stone for the
especially for this, they did. So it's spectacular. It's just amazing. But the only thing is, it does seem a bit out of place because it's a Gothic monument and would seem to belong more to the old town, because this is your Georgian new town, and of course Walter Scott was a Georgian. He was here, he orchestrated the visit of King George IV here to Edinburgh in 1822, and he was a great promoter of tartan, he was a great promoter of the Highlands, as Joe was saying, and the culture, music, song, poetry. He was just everybody's person, and so a very appropriate monument, I think, and good that he's facing towards the new town. It's appropriate as well. So what we'll do is, in fact, maybe this is a good point. I was going to talk about Jenner's department store here, and if you look at it here, this is in the Victorian Renaissance, what we call Victorian Renaissance style of architecture, but there was a business here, Jenner's, from 1838, and it was started by Charles Jenner and Charles Kennington, and they were linen drapery people. They originally were employed by somebody else, and one day they decided to take a sickie, to take a day off their work, to go to the Musselburgh races. And they were spotted by their employer, and they got their books, they got kicked out. So they got together and said, why don't we just start our own business? And that was the beginning of Jenner's department store in 1838. Now, unfortunately, in the 1890s, there was a fire, and it destroyed the original building. But the site is the same. It's the same site, and they had to rebuild it, and that's what you can actually see today. Now, this store has closed just now. Various reasons. There was a company called Sports Direct, House of Fraser, that took it over, and it could not survive what with online shopping and modern methods of purchasing. It was a place I can remember going into with my mother, very much the old style of Draper's shop, very personal, very engaging, but a bit out of fashion. And it did struggle a lot, and then it finally closed today. And it's been taken over by a gentleman called Anders Poulsen, who is on the rich list. He is a billionaire, and he has got this financial company. He's from Denmark, and he owns more land in Scotland than the Queen actually does. He's hugely, hugely wealthy, and he's at the head of this company, which now owns the store, and it is closed for refurbishment. It's going to take 4 years. It's going to be modernised, and at the top they are going to have a hotel, and below the hotel is going to be a cafe, restaurant area, and below that is going to be the department store, which they want to bring back to the original form, which suits the building. So they are very much tender, loving care at the moment to give us a better experience when it reopens. But controversially, when Sports Direct lost it and it was sold on, they took down the Jenner's sign. And there's 3 Jenner's signs, and they decided, this brand belongs to us, so we're not going to let that brand go out of our hands, so we're taking these signs down. But little did they know that as part of this building being listed, that you can't do that, because you're actually changing the appearance and the history of the building. So they were ordered by the council and those various other groups canvassing to have these signs put back. And today, thankfully, the signs Jenner's are still there. So the people in Edinburgh were outraged when that happened.
Outraged.
Just
Absolutely.
imagine.
I think there was nearly a revolution in Morningside, because it was the Morningside ladies who would go for tea at Jenner's.
Yeah, so it's a very fine building, and if you go closer, I don't know if we can come a wee bit closer, the
detail is quite
figures,
spectacular.
sculpted figures down the bottom, are all of women, and got various figures, and you can maybe see one figure with a harp, playing a harp, or a class sack if you like, which is one of the ancient musical instruments of Scotland. If you go around the corner a bit, you will see there's a Native American lady as well, but maybe it's a wee bit harder to see. Maybe she's a bit just out of sight at the moment. So this was all to do with women supporting the house, and they're known as caryatids. They're from Grecian forms of supporting pillars in the form of human beings. So Jenner's department store, and I'm sure that many of the people who are watching today have been in here when they've been visiting.
A few comments coming up, people do remember it as well. People who visited Edinburgh remember it with affection. But the plans for it are really good. I'm really pleased that Danish guy is really looking after it. So thumbs up to him for snubbing the nose of that con man.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. So we're going to...
I've got a good word to say about him, I'm sorry. Sure, I'll get done for libel now.
Not at all, not at all. So we're moving now along Princess Street Gardens, and if any of you have been to Edinburgh, you've maybe taken an open-top bus tour on Edinburgh Bus Tours, but we're not going right over there just now, but I used to work for them, And it's a good way, you know. We do a really good job of what we do. We are Blue Badge guides and we tell you the real story, but sometimes if you want to get a quick overview before you come to us to know where you might want to go, taking an open-top bus tour is quite a good thing to do.
I always recommend them.
Get a good overview. So what we're going to do now is look at this sculpture, and of course, knowing me, I'm going to talk about the sculptor. The subject of it is David Livingstone, and David Livingstone, he born in 1813. He was a missionary, he was a physician as well, and an explorer, and he was obsessed in a way with finding the source of the Nile. He travelled to Africa, and he had great support from the Geographical Society on various excursions to Africa. He was saying to people, though, his explorations were to raise his profile. So if he could find the source of the Nile, then people would listen to him, because he was anti-slavery. He was aware of the terrible distress and atrocities that were taking place, many people dying. So that was his reason for doing the exploration stuff as well. He was attacked by a lion, and there is actually a lion on the sculpture around the back, but he survived. And also, you see that the lion didn't survive in the sculpture. See the head there, and he's holding out a Bible, and that connects with his religious context. And see the other side here, walk around.
And I think that's one of the reasons that his statue has survived, not being pulled down, because he was anti-slavery.
He was anti-slavery.
Although he was a missionary, and yeah, we can say that he was part of the imperialist history of Great Britain, but he was anti-slavery.
He was born in Blantyre in Scotland, over in the west, and you can go and visit his birthplace, David Livingstone's birthplace, which is very interesting because they've got articles that belong to him associated with his explorations. But there's a famous event when Henry Morton Stanley from the New York Herald got involved in Livingstone's life, because Livingstone had disappeared in Africa for 6 years, and Stanley was a reporter, and he went over and he actually found Livingstone. And we've got the famous saying, of course, Dr. Livingstone, I presume, which he maybe never really said, but we're not sure. But you may have seen the film, and I think Spencer Tracy played the character of Henry Morton Stanley in the film. So look out for that. And I've forgotten the name of the person that played Livingstone, because he wasn't quite so famous, but that's something to look out for. Now, I'd like to talk about the sculptor. The sculptor was a lady called Amelia Peyton Hill, and she was of a family from Dunfermline. Her father was Noel Peyton, and he was quite an outstanding artist, and her brothers were all artists as well. And she couldn't miss, she was going to have to go into the art line too. So she was a great sculptor. She married David Octavius Hill, who was a pioneer in photography from the 19th century, associated with Adamson, Hill and Adamson. And they lived on Carlton Hill, and I think we've covered a bit of the early pioneers of photography when we were up in Carlton Hill. But she was married to him, and after he died, she did a very amazing sculpted head of her husband, and it is over the grave in the Dean Cemetery, where Octavius Hill is actually buried. Now, she was remarkable. She did a sculpture of Robert Burns, which is in Dumfries. She did a sculpture of Shelley, Percy Shelley, and her work is all over the place. But you know, woman, she doesn't get the same accolades compared to if it had been a man. We talk about James Steele all the time, who's got sculptures all over Edinburgh, including Walter Scott. Yeah. But I think it's time that Amelia Peyton Hill got a bit more recognition, and she was a member of the Royal Scottish Academy, and she lived into the early part of the 20th century to quite an age. And the resting place is underneath that sculpture of her husband in the Dean Cemetery. So another fascinating character.
It's also, in Edinburgh, there's not enough statues about women.
No.
And, and I think that needs to be addressed as well. Because there's quite a few women that, you could imagine getting statues erected on their behalf, because the role they've played in the development of Scotland as a nation.
I think so, definitely, yeah. Finally, before I'm going to pass over to Joe, I'd just like us to have a wee look at this building here, the one with the planet on the top there, very elegant cupola there. This used to be for size department store. It used to be the case this was the men's shop. It used to be where you went to get your made-to-measure suit done or your graduation gown, hiring it from there. And it was very much a sign of the times that shop didn't survive either. Unfortunately, that style of trading didn't survive. It has been taken over by Burton's, it's been taken over by Topshop, and you can see today. But remarkably, this is one of the first steel reinforced buildings in Edinburgh, which goes back to the early part of the 20th century. And if you look at the architecture, look at the windows, because you could not have these big windows in a stone building without the thing being very weak. So they had to have steel reinforcement. So that is another feature of this East End here of Princess Street.
And again, Topshop and everything else has gone under as well.
It's gone under too.
That was done by another crook, Green.
Yes, yes.
Hell mend them, that's what I say.
So, I'm just going to pass over to Joe here, and we'll both chip in here and there.
Cecil Hardwicke played Livingston in the movie. Thank you, Louise. That's
great.
Yeah,
great to know. Great to know. Thank you.
So good afternoon from Joe here. I'd like to say hello to Jim and Karen, who are down in Innerleithen in the Borders. I say to give them a little shout out, and also to Phil Butterworth, who's down in Brighton. This weather is just hitting the whole of the UK, so I don't think there's any dry place in the UK at the moment. It seems to be like the whole month of May has just been one big washout, but things look like going to change quite soon. So we'll just continue on a little bit the gardens here. We'll walk over to the Balmoral Hotel in a minute. But again, just to take in the view of the old town cityscape, I always think it's a gorgeous place just to come and have to just look at the architecture here. But I said I was going to talk about the gardens itself. As I said, it used to be there used to be a loch. It was known as the North Loch or the Nor Loch. It was drained to make way for the new town. We started to build the new town. When they drained it, they did find the remains of quite a number of bodies in the bottom of the loch. Now remember, this used to be Edinburgh's watering hole, so this is where they get the water from. We have told you the stories before about Gardyloo, where everybody used to throw all of their waste out of the window, and everything got washed down to this loch, so it was also a place of great diseases. So it was a good thing to get rid of the loch that was here. The bodies that were found dated back to the witch trial period, and in Edinburgh, if you were accused of being a witch, you'd been taken down to the Nor Loch here, and you'd be thrown in. Your hands and legs would be tied. If you floated to the top, then you believed you were definitely a witch. You were doing what was known as a witch's swim, in which case you were then taken up to Edinburgh Castle and you were burned alive at the stake. So either way, anybody accuses you of being a witch in Edinburgh, it's a no-win situation. Just get out of town altogether. It's not a very nice thing, not a very nice history here, but it is part of life that we've inherited from our ancestors. Yeah, they did have the witch trials here. And through the cityscape here, you can see the crown at the top of the building here, and that is St Giles Cathedral. And William will be doing some civic ceremonies in the cathedral as well. Somebody's mentioned there that they saw his entourage going through. Now, William's got a good relationship, and a sort of good and bad relationship here with Scotland. And he said so himself in one of the interviews that he was in Scotland when they got the message, when the information of his mother Diana was killed. They were actually up in Balmoral. But he studied at St Andrew University, and him and Kate used to come down to Edinburgh incognito, I used to stay at the Tiger Lily Hotel. And there's a room in Tiger Lily Hotel on George Street that's dedicated to William and Kate. So let's go we'll walk a wee bit further over. We'll just go over, the weather's kind of closing in on us a wee bit here. We'll take you over to the Waverly. Now the Waverly Market and the Waverly Station, named after the Waverly novels. So our train station is actually named after Walter Scott's novels as well.
You can hear music, hear people.
There's a wee festival going on at the moment, a little gin festival. Trying to be positive with the weather.
Yeah.
But we'll just take you on to the roof of the market. So this is the Waverly Market. Underneath here is a big shopping mall. But I want you to have a look at the big hotel here and also the landscape of the city across the other side here. This is the divide between the old town and the new town. And we've got some hardy people in the bars here.
They're undercover.
Undercover. So we're just going to try and get our way round to the other side here. You've got to have a very positive attitude to have a festival here in Edinburgh. So there's a gin festival going on. Let's take a walk through here.
I think the Edinburgh gin's quite nice, isn't it?
Edinburgh gin is lovely.
I'm not actually a particular gin drinker, but when I've had it, I've really enjoyed it. It's nice. Yeah.
Well, it's because of all the botanicals. It's not like the London dry gin, which can be a bit raw. A lot of Scottish gins now, most of the distilleries in Scotland actually produce gin, because gin you can sell straight away. Whiskey is going to be in the cask or in the barrel for 3 years and 1 day, but gin, it's a cash cow. You can get your gin, sell it, and get it out there. And there's even a distillery in here in the city centre of the old town from here. But I want to talk a wee bit, just to end the tour here, also about the Balmoral Hotel. I love the Balmoral Hotel. It's owned by Roccoforte now. It's a grand old dame. It started off as a railway hotel. It was known as North British, which I always thought was a bit imperialist in itself, the North British. So it never called the Balmoral. And it's a real old lady right above the train station here. So the train station is almost underneath us. And it used to be you could get the train in here and get the elevator straight up to the hotel. It's a 5-star hotel, and Mike and I work in there quite regularly with a couple of companies who bring over their workers as a big incentive. Edinburgh is a very popular place for incentives. They come over here to say thank you to the best performers, and the Balmoral really lays on a lovely, lovely couple of days for them. And we organise day tours. We go on day tours with the guests up to St Andrews or some of the historic sites. So this is almost like one of our offices in here, an unofficial office for the Scottish Blue Badge Guides.
It's got a palm co-op, isn't it? And you can sit and have your coffee and listen to music. And there's a musician's harp music, a musician's gallery.
Up in the gallery.
Yeah.
And also J.K. Rowling has got a suite dedicated here because the last Harry Potter book, she booked a suite in here. And so you can actually book the J.K. Rowling's suite if you want to, if you're that way inclined. Again, lovely views from this part of the city. It's pity the weather for the wee festival going on here. But would like to say thanks again for watching us and spending time with us. Well, hopefully, even despite the weather, we brighten up your day. Because we love doing what we do. We're intrepid guides. As you can see, we've got the Scottish Tour Guides Association on my umbrella here. Part of our uniform. You can't go far in Scotland without it.